if that helps as well.
But actually, I know that Ujo Music in the United States company. What's the difference between the two companies, Paper Chain
Sure.
and Ujo Music?
So Ujo Music, good friends of mine, I work with them on a different level. So Ujo Music is creating a Bandcamp. They work with artists of sort, where you can upload your music directly onto the platform where fans can buy it in using Ethereum. And the money generated from your sales actually don't go through different intermediaries but directly to artists' pockets. So think of it like an iTunes download or a Bandcamp or SoundCloud where you have a monetization offer. But on our side, we are strictly a B2B companies. We don't deal with the artists directly. We work with, in the music side, we work with, say, record labels or the music distributors who have thousands of artists under them. But we also work with all digital content owners, companies like ad publishers. We work with the video game agencies, film agencies, any digital media content that has that can be consumed by users, but results in a payout, a delayed payout. That's the market. So we always work with companies rather than users.
Actually, I don't fully understand your comment, but
Yeah.
just I ask you.
Yeah.
Prepare.
Okay. Okay. I can clarify. You can ask me again. I can clarify. Yeah.
You said yesterday that 1 million songs per second are played in the world. But if we think that the 1 million song is played in the various music streaming service, the one music streaming service is a handful of the 1 million. But even in that situation, the transaction is huge for the blockchain system.
Yeah.
Because as I know that Bitcoin and Ethereum hasn't overcome the limit of transaction.
Of course. Yeah. So I think when a lot of people misunderstand when they think you're building a company on blockchain, you don't have to build your entire technology on blockchain, but rather blockchain is part of your technology stack, like how cloud is, or big data, or AI, or machine learning. These are small parts of your technology use case, right? So when it comes to music streaming, it would not make sense to actually put everything on chain. There are some companies who are doing that, but they will suffer at scale because our current technologies are just not ready for it, especially on the blockchain side. So there are two things I would say. There are lots of new technologies coming on the blockchain side that will enable high scale, high throughput applications like music streaming, for example. But on the other side, what you would actually want to do is create like a hybrid or a mix between on-chain, which is blockchain kind of applications, and off-chain, which is basically internet. So it's on-chain plus off-chain architecture is what I would advise how you create. So in case of music streaming, you don't need to collect information when the user clicked a song, when he played, when he paused. Those are intelligent data that does not belong on the blockchain. What belongs on the blockchain is probably the copyrights, the identity of the song, the identity of the owners of the song, and who to pay out to. So then that process does not actually happen when you play a song. It may happen based on your subscription, maybe at the end of month and stuff. So I think that misconception is that for blockchain, there is a use case. There are some use cases even within your company, and you have to figure out which is the right use case and then use just that, not the whole operation.
I a little bit understand.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
What kind of technology you develop to boost the volume of transaction?
So, could you repeat that?
What kind of technology your company develop to enhance the transaction of volume of transaction?
Yeah, yeah. So it's been quite difficult because everything is so new in the even on Ethereum side. Ethereum is probably the most advanced smart contract platform, but it's still very early. So what we did is that we built our stack completely on smart contracts when it comes to blockchain, and there are lots of good technologies and tools available to build better applications today, and it's getting easier and easier. However, it's still, again, like I would say, very early in terms of development, and yeah, it's in terms of interacting with blockchain, all our code is smart contracts. Yeah.
As you think, there is any project using blockchain in the music industry, which service is complete and which service is successful?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there are not many blockchain projects that are live today. However, there are some that are have been live, but they still suffer user adoption. Ujo Music is a great example. They went to production or mainnet some time ago, but I think we've been suffering as Ethereum's as an industry as a whole. We don't have that many daily active users yet. So right now there is still a problem of user adoption. There is a barrier to entry when a new user who has no idea what cryptocurrency is, when they have to interact with the dApp, they have to set up a wallet, they have to restore the phrases, they have to save all the security measures, and then have MetaMask, and then have some money in there, and finally you'll have to interact with the dApps. So what a lot of companies are doing right now, especially some companies who are in blockchain that are already released, is to leverage something called meta transactions, which really removes the barrier to entry on the Ethereum side. There are some couple of other projects who are actually live in music side. There's a company called Musicoin, which is basically it's a blockchain. When you upload your music, when fans listen to music, it generates a payout immediately. So that's an interesting model, and it's been around for a while. I'm not sure how big it is. And there is a live ticketing company called EventJoy, who was actually acquired by Ticketmaster. So you can say that's a pretty successful project, because if someone like Ticketmaster acquired them, even though it's so early for the blockchain space, I would say that's a pretty big win. So there are some companies, but mostly what we need is so this year has been the year of infrastructure. A lot of companies are building protocol level, very low level components, but we need high level apps so that users can start interacting with them. I think next year we will see a lot of actual consumer facing apps, a lot more.
Actually, I contact Ujo Music and use that service, but for me, it's a little bit difficult to get a wallet.
I
even overcome the first step.
Oh, really? Okay, that is the biggest step actually. Just setting up the wallet. They removed that feature where you have to have a wallet to just browse and stuff. Initially, you had to. It's really the entire industry. It's just the wallet. Having that wallet is the biggest step for new users. It can be a little like, never mind kind of thing.
How can we make it easy for customer and
Yeah.
for dealers.
So, two things I would say is really focus on design and user experience. For example, last week I was at DevCon in Prague, which is the annual Ethereum convention, developer convention. There were 4,000 people, I think, there. And they had a UX, user experience track and design awards. Everyone focusing on consumer experience, the right design principles. But what all of this means is that they're giving a lot of importance to a user on how to minimize friction, minimize the barrier to entry on using a DApp. So we need more of that, and we need more research. Like we need more, a lot of research, how we can improve these practices. We need standards, design standards that the entire industry can follow. For example, Google has released some few years ago something called material design, which is a design framework for developing apps or websites very quickly. And we need something like that in crypto as well, because in crypto there are some complicated concepts like gas costs, and transaction speed, your private keys, safety, security. So all of these are new issues for users they have no idea about. So we need to have good design standards and principles on how to help them onboard. And lastly, I would say that we need to encourage companies to really focus on user experience for the next, from yesterday.
You said that if we use blockchain to user industry, we can reduce the black box royalty.
Yeah.
I don't know what the share of the black box royalty to the entire royalty share.
Right. So I'm glad you asked. So where Paperchain may not be working on it directly, but we have worked on it as a company in the past. This is something I will be pursuing personally, and I don't know if you're familiar with something called a DAO. Do you know what a DAO is? Okay. A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. It's a framework to create a company on blockchain without any owners. Rather, think of it like a robot company in a way, and nobody is controlling it. And I figured a DAO makes a lot of sense to handle something like black box. So I call it Project Black Box. So what I'm building is a set of smart contracts that can help manage these black box funds. So to expand on how big that problem is, from our research and previous studies, we've seen the affected royalties to be around 10% of the global royalties. So in the recording industry, just the recording industry alone, it's $26 billion a year. So 10% of that is really, right now, is $2 to $2.5 billion, and that's our affected. And we've seen this issue in multiple cases. For example, Spotify have been falling under lawsuits in America for infringement of copyrights because they didn't have the right information about the songwriters. And you can see the lawsuit settlements. Each lawsuit probably is somewhere between 350 million and 150 million, which is just for lawsuit. It makes you wonder how much data is there. And this is a problem that happens a lot in various different countries. We have personally worked with different societies' data to clean it up, to see how we can solve the problem at large. But the main idea is that once the blockchain world is ready and rights management is on blockchain, we may not have to deal with black box royalties as much. But I still think we need a solution until then. And I think it will take probably 10 to 20 years to get there. And I really think this is a problem that should have never been in the first place. But 10% of royalties is a lot of money. and it's extremely difficult for creators and artists to make a living, to make salary and out of their songs, and they should be getting all the money that they have earned.
Yesterday, Glasgow CEO Kim Tae-won said that he encountered obstacles from the previous industry leaders because they have a vested interest in music source. They don't have intention to give away their music source to blockchain industry. Do you understand?
I was actually outside, but do you mean he said don't put your music on blockchain? Don't give away.
Previous big players like Apple Music, Spotify, in global. But in Korea, there is also like the company, Melon or Naver Music.
Oh yeah.
He said that they have difficult in obtaining the music source from the company because they don't have
Right. Yeah, that's a problem because there is no framework to actually acquire licenses, and in music industry, especially as a technology company like a streaming service or app developer, it is by far the most painful and difficult process to acquire your mechanical licenses and other licenses depending on your country's copyright laws, so that you can put music on your service, right? I have seen personally a lot of entrepreneurs and engineers and whatnot who have been discouraged from building very good applications just because it's so difficult for the music industry to work with the music industry to acquire the licenses correctly, and it is by far one of the most expensive operations in setting up a streaming service as well, I believe. So how we can improve that is that I know there are lots of consultants in the United States. So if they're specifically worried about United States music or UK music, there are consultants or lawyers, entertainment lawyers, that can help you acquire these licenses. And I think generally that's how you should be working, but it should be a lot easier. There are some companies who are creating like sandboxes where you can get a free license for a small catalog for 6 months, and then kind of apply for a larger one. But yeah, there is no formal process in actually acquiring licenses to put your music, but it's a very difficult one. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Some blockchain leader in Korea said in the conference that to develop blockchain mainnet need 100 developers. They did input the number of developers to develop mainnet, and to develop DApps, they input 200 developers. It means that if a company develops blockchain service, there must be a huge number of developers. So in small business cannot challenge that industry. I mean, I understand. Do you agree with that comment?
No, I don't actually. How do I say this? So think about this, right? Like we are still early, yes, and like ideas like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they came out of largely singular individuals like Satoshi Nakamoto or Vitalik Buterin, and there are several small teams or individuals in blockchain who are producing large amount of technical expertise, research, and it's surprisingly coming from smaller teams and individuals. And having worked in both corporates and startups right now, I can say for sure that startups are very nimble. They can move very fast. That's because they're small teams. And blockchain is a space where it's so early and it's so new, you cannot be an enterprise because enterprises follow rules. They have processes to how to create, how to deploy, how to ship, etc. Startups can move a lot because if you're building on blockchain, what you need is research and development. You need just R&D kind of players. So you're gonna make a lot of mistakes because you need to make a lot of mistakes, and a lot of what you write today, what you build today may not be. It can be outdated in like 3 weeks or a month because that's how fast the ecosystem is moving. So I don't think you will need hundreds of developers for blockchain right now. Maybe in the future when you have a much bigger team. But I have known companies who have less than 100 engineers who are making $1 billion in revenue. So it's really up to the team and how you see it. But you will always have a mix of some blockchain engineers and a lot of non-blockchain engineers. So when you set up a team as a CTO or as a head of engineering, you will always have maybe like for a 10-member team, I would say you probably need, if you're creating a D app, you probably need 3 blockchain engineers at the most, 3 or 4, so it's like 30 to 40% really. But I think it's too much for a 100% 100-person blockchain company.
Do you think that we need some regulations that big music company urge it to distribute their music source to startup or blockchain startups in the starting stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, it's a very big pain point for startups to acquire licenses so that they can build on top of build a music app, for example. But the thing with blockchain that really disrupts this area is that maybe for new content that are being generated, because the identity is on blockchain, what is going to be also on blockchain is the licensing permissions. So if I created a track and I will allow anyone to use this commercially, or any app developer to use this, and they get an automatic mechanical license, for example, that really removes the need for negotiation and all that, and all they have to do is go to the website and say, yes, give me that song, I want to use that in my app. Right now, as I explained earlier, it's so difficult to acquire licenses for an entire catalog maybe. And I think we need to automate a lot of these functionalities, because when you automate all of these, you will see innovations grow very fast from technology creators. And I think having a shared database or a distributed, not controlled by a single entity, a copyright database of all tracks and you can access by artist or licenses types, and just kind of like start using them and reference through blockchain would be the future of it, really.
I don't know exactly how things go on Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Google and Amazon or Microsoft. As I know, there is a concrete move to the blockchain technology. Do you think that the companies don't have interest in blockchain technology, or someday they dive into that industry and take hold of that?
Yeah, as far as I know, Facebook is actively working on it. I believe Google will also work or has been working on it, but they will probably do the things their own way, as they have been. Big companies are starting to like invest in it, especially Microsoft. Microsoft actually, their cloud solutions are supporting Ethereum on Azure, which is a huge move. So Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is basically Ethereum for enterprise companies in a private federated blockchain, which is very useful for enterprise companies, right? And so we are starting to see big players also enter. But the thing is, like again, how I'm saying, like startups are probably moving faster in this space because they're making a lot of mistakes, learning from it. They are the ones setting new standards, trying different things, and the innovation is at the edges. So the big companies are in the center. They're still far away from the innovation. Startups are here, I would say, and the blockchain innovation is right here. So. What I think we will see is a lot of big companies trying to buy blockchain companies. But that's the point of blockchain, is that you are creating decentralized organizations where possibly an acquisition is not possible because there is no equity, because the code, everything is open source, and there's no intellectual property, there's no patents. So why would a company acquire them, right? They would rather build it. And a lot of blockchain models that are coming up, the startups, it really disrupts a lot of these Silicon Valley companies' presence in different ways. I think it rebalances the economy and the power concentration from Silicon Valley to the world. Like if you see any blockchain company right now, they're in Russia, they're in China, Korea, India, and these are big companies with big ideas that are coming up, and they have a extremely early mover advantage. And I think 5-10 years time we will see new Facebook, new Apple, new Amazon, but on the blockchain side.
In the wake of making of the internet, there is a game and search engine like Google has had a big role in promoting the internet industry.
Right.
And after that, Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat,
Absolutely.
like the social media promote the mobile device. What do you think about the next big killer app?
To
the blockchain.
Gotcha. I think as Joe Lubin, or the co-founder of Ethereum, has said recently, it's not about the killer app in blockchain, it's really about the killer ecosystem. Right now we need that killer ecosystem so that apps can start developing right now, which makes a lot of sense. But a lot of big companies in internet have come up who have achieved the critical mass only after the internet bubble burst. When there's so much hype in .com bubble on Silicon Valley and in Wall Street, there was a lot of money being poured and it just burst, and then really out of which came the big companies who have survived through that. And I think we will see something very similar here. We will have a crypto burst, a bubble will burst, and then maybe it has already, but it will burst, and then whoever survives it would be some of the biggest players. But I can honestly say 3 companies that stand out to me, or 4 companies I would say that stand out to me that have the potential. One is Ethereum Foundation, then EOS is one, Consensus is the other, and the last one is Parity, or Web3 Foundation, or Parity Technologies. I think these 4 players are significantly large in this ecosystem already. They are contributing heavily in all kinds of layers. And I think in 5 years' time, all these companies will be doing something so different and so big. These companies will be the new Facebook and all that.
What about Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
So just, cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I think we need to see Bitcoin for what it is right now, which is a store of value currency. It's a currency. It's a digital currency, right? I don't know if the Bitcoin community will be opening up Bitcoin so that you can build smart contracts on top of it. But maybe we don't need every cryptocurrency to have smart contracts. You know, things like Zcash and Bitcoin are extremely important to our ecosystem. And I think a lot of right now what we're seeing is an internet of blockchains. All blockchains are getting connected, which means Bitcoin will be connected to Ethereum on some of these networks, which means you can actually have the apps use Bitcoin, which is probably the biggest innovation that's going to happen in there, because we can accept various currencies using smart contracts on say Cardano or Ethereum or Tezos, for example, and that, I think that is the biggest value that we can come up, but we need just currencies as well, which preserves privacy and gets us a lot of speed and throughput. Things like Zcash and Bitcoin are very important, I would say.
Is it possible to embed smart contract in Bitcoin?
Not as of today, but it's really up to the Bitcoin community, you know, if they enable it. But I don't think they will, but I don't think they need to either. I think what they can focus is on interfacing and integrate with other smart contract technologies like Ethereum.
How will the relations between music service providers like Apple Music and composers and performers and publishers change if we introduce the blockchain to industry?
Yeah, I think it may not affect them that much in the near term, but what they will see is that a lot of changes are going to happen in licensing, ownership, and copyright data. So how they acquire the catalog information, that's going to change a lot. And it's difficult to say because most music streaming companies are not profitable, including YouTube, including Apple Music, Pandora, Spotify as well. Before they went public, they were all generating revenue, but they are not generating profit. So which makes you think streaming service is a very expensive operation. But in case of Apple and Google Play, they have the backing of entire Google. So for them, losing money on music, it's fine. You know, it's just they're still acquiring customers for their ecosystem. But when it comes to someone like Spotify or SoundCloud, that's very important. So Spotify went public, and now they have a public cash flow they can tap into, and that changed the game completely. But that's what the power or the essence in blockchain is, that it creates smaller communities around people that really work. And to create smaller communities, there needs to be a very large shared infrastructure. So you don't have to build everything from scratch. You need a shared system, shared database, like a copyright database, and shared infrastructure like Ethereum, and you can start building your apps. Maybe you need a karaoke app or something like that. You know, it's very easy. Then it'll become very easy to build on top of Ethereum. And so to your point, I think it doesn't change companies like Spotify performance in general, because they have the users. But I think what the blockchain will speak to is to the creators, and they'll use it more than just for streaming, as even for fundraising. And I think what we may see having a paradigm shift on is if we get a lot of users on blockchain, and that's when it's trouble for Spotify and Apple Music, because there are lots of companies who have a head start on that right now.
Do you think that Apple Music can transform their service to blockchain?
They can, but will they? Because for them to transform is just like, it's such a huge undertaking. It's such a huge. I cannot imagine the Apple Music team to be more than 20 or 10 or 20 engineers in there in Apple. But there are companies who are building with, like you said, 100 engineers or 50 member teams who are all dedicated to the blockchain side of things. So unless these big companies acquire, and I think that's what we will see, a lot of big companies trying to acquire so that they keep their market share. But the narrative from the blockchain is companies are very different. It's to really distribute wealth, distribute power, so that the power is more in the hands of the user rather than the company itself. Yeah.
Last question.
That's it? Okay.
If we visit United States to search to cover the blockchain industry, which company do you recommend to visit?
Oh, if you go to the United States?
Not me, but our colleague.
Oh, right. I would highly recommend Consensus and Ujo Music, obviously. If you're in New York, there are some really great ideas. Different teams are being built. I think I am personally a big fan of 0x, and then MakerDAO, which is a stable coin. There are lots of companies in the United States, but I think Consensus is a good place to start. But New York and San Francisco have the most blockchain talent right now. New York and San Francisco has the most blockchain startups and lots of blockchain people there. So I think that's where I would go and start. There are so many meetups, so many meetings and conferences every week. There is something going on there in blockchain. But yeah.
If we widen our scope to the world, which region is the most active in the blockchain?
New York, Berlin, New York, San Francisco, London. Those are the biggest ones that as far as I know. But Berlin seems to be the biggest one, really. It has the most talent, and really some of the people there are really smart. Lots of good companies, but everyone's moving to Berlin for that.
So, one last question.
Yeah.
Which is the what do you anticipate that which service is the killer app in the blockchain era?
Right now, which app is the killer app? It's difficult. There is not one app I can think of like that.
People say that blockchain Uber, blockchain Airbnb, and blockchain Spotify. They say that. But,
oh, I see. Oh, okay. I think there is a lot of. I can tell you what I'm excited for rather than pick. So there's a company called Aragon. They are creating an app or a D app to create companies on blockchain. So I can deploy a startup on a blockchain using Aragon, and it's called they're called DAOs, and it's a very revolutionary idea on how you create companies. A lot of charity, non-for-profit companies global decentralized companies will be on Aragon, I feel, and it's a very important system. And they've just released their 0.6 version of their app. I would highly recommend you check it out. That's probably what blockchain is about, like to create things in such a decentralized manner that nobody can control it. Not one person can control it. There's no single point of failure, and it's completely autonomous and completely decentralized. But to create self-running companies, self-executing companies, it's a very powerful idea. And I think Aragon has the potential to be a killer dApp, but we will see a lot more than Aragon in a couple of years' time.
It has a website.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah. Whoops. Oh. Yeah. It's oh, try HTTPS. It's working? Okay, let me try again. Let's just
Sorry.
here. Or let's just search it. That was the one. Oops. Yeah, it's this one.
Okay, maybe internet connection is not so good.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe
US phone.
no, this is it's just global. Yeah, this is the one. Yeah. They also released a new grant foundation for $1 million. They're giving away $1 million for companies who are building on top of them, which is great, right? But that project Black Box I told you about, I will be creating an Aragon DAO. Basically, it's a very interesting idea. Their CEO is from Spain, actually, but their company is everywhere. They're Swiss. They're registered in Switzerland, but they're in different places. Yeah, it's okay.
Can we take a photo?
Sure. Yeah.
Start?
Okay. Yeah.